You're listening to Struggle for a Name, Women in the Namantar Andolan, and I'm Emily Hayes. When I was a student at Yale University in 2015 and 2016, protests about racism on campus zigzagged across universities in the United States. At our school, Black and Native American women and transgender people were the leaders of the protests. One demand was to change the name of one of the centers for student life on campus from the name of a famous advocate for slavery to someone who represented the rest of the student body. One chant created at Yale that quickly crossed over to other campuses was, "We out here, we've been here, we ain't leaving, we are loved." It gets at the core of what felt so wrong to so many students. Poor, Black, Native American, Latinx, and Asian people have been part of Yale for a long time, but they have always fought, always had to fight for the right to be there, to be seen, and to get the resources easily available to white, wealthy students. This is an experience not unique to Yale or to the United States.
Hi, I'm Monika Khobragade. That clip was from a protest that I went to in Nagpur, Maharashtra, which is where I belong from. The protest was against a political interference in the universities. The clip shows a protest about suicide of Dalit student Rohit Vemula. He was pursuing his PhD from Hyderabad Central University, where he was an active part of the Ambedkar Student Association, or ASA. ASA was going to show a film that the student wing of the ruling party, the Bharatiya Janata Party or BJP, didn't want to show. This seems to be a reason Rohit and 4 other students from ASA were expelled for 1 semester. They were also expelled from their hostels and their scholarship was stopped. In January 2016, Rohit committed suicide, although some say it was an academic murder. On one side, politicians like Appa Rao and Dattatreya were interfering in the universities. But when students protest, some politicians said that students should focus on their studies, not politics. This was an incident where we can see a clear discrimination against lower caste students in universities, even though the Constitution of India gives equal rights.
In this podcast series, I'm talking about a very similar social movement to these, the Namantar Andolan, which happened from 1978 to 1994. I got money from Yale University for this project. Shout out to the Parker Huang Fellowship, the South Asian Language Fellowship, and the South Asian Rescue Fellowship. Literally, name change movement, the Namantar Andolan, was about way more than the name of the university. It tells the story of a whole decade in Maharashtra.
Dr. Vikas Jambhulkar, my advisor, introduced Emily to me at a conference where we talked about this project. I was pursuing my master's degree in political science from Nagpur University, and I also participate actively in social as well as political activities. I was interested because the project is about Namantar Andolan, about changing Marathwada University to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar University. We can see how badly politics was played by ruling party that time, and also the role of identity politics, emergence of Dalit Panther, and also student politics in that time. As my interest area was so similar to this project, when Emily asked me about it, I got so excited and started working on this.
And because she's about to start an internship in Delhi, she's only going to be with me for 1 episode. So we're taking advantage of Monika's political science expertise to figure out what exactly is going on lately and how did we get here.
Hate has taken center stage in the politics. Donald Trump is president of US, and I think we have probably all heard the racist, sexist sound bites from his campaign. And Narendra Modi, now Prime Minister of India, was previously investigated by Supreme Court appointed committees for his role in 2002 riots against Muslim community in Gujarat. All this feels very different from politics 30 years ago, and the term people often use for this change is identity politics. Identity politics refers to politics based on the interest of a particular social group, like Modi and Hindu peoples, and Trump and white peoples. This term also covers the Bahujan Samaj Party a party that represents people denied human rights under the caste, or you can say Manuwadi system. In United States, it covers Black Lives Matter, or organization most famous for fighting police violence against black people.
Sometimes it can be used negatively to imply that people are bringing too much identity into something that should be secular/colorblind. But is there ever really politics without identity? For example, the original US Constitution didn't say anything explicitly about race or gender, but that's partially because there were only white men in the room. If we assume that humans usually sort of work for their own self-interest, even if they think of that interest in lots of different ways, what should we call this recent shift in politics in India?
Emily, would one way to think of it be a shift in type of casteism? Before PM Modi and his party, there was basically one party, that is Indian National Congress. This group fought for independence in 1947 and was the only established contender for power in 1970. The leaders were mostly upper caste and Hindu, but the thing was that their voters reflected a totally different group of peoples.
That difference was very visible during the Namantar Andolan.
लाठीचार्ज झाला होता ना, पोलीस पुढे जाऊ नव्हते देऊ लागले. ते मंत्री होते ना, ते येणार होते ना, त्या माणसाला पुढे जाऊ नव्हते देऊ लागले. मग त्यांनी पोलीस भरपूर बोलवले होते. बायकाला का मुलांना असं सोडून नाही लागले, मारत होते.
कोण तुमच्या बरोबर होते?
भरपूर सेना होती, पण त्याच्यामध्ये मॅच ही पोरगी फेकली.
That was Jamnabai Appa Gaikwad and her daughter Sangeeta Deepak Pradhan. In the early 1980s, Jamnabai and other women were waiting to deliver a petition about the Namantar to Vasant Dada Patil when they were attacked by the police with batons. A lathi charge, as it's called here. Vasant Dada Patil was chief minister, kind of like a prime minister for the state of Maharashtra, right?
Yes, and he was in Congress. He had announced his support for the Namantran in 1977, but the whole government had backed away when violence broke out in reaction to the announcement.
So the police were beating up protesters, including women, and the protesters were retaliating by throwing stones at the police. To stop Vasant Dada Patil from passing them without receiving the petition, Jamnabai dodged through the chaos and threw her baby in front of his car. This baby survived and grew up to be Sangeeta Thai. As a side note, Bai and Thai are Marathi honorifics for women. Thai can apply to anyone, and Bai is specifically for older women. नंतर लाठीचार्ज झाला की काय झालं?
नाही, मला फेकल्यानंतर लाठीचार्ज झाला. मग ते मंत्री उतरले होते ना गाडीतून, मग त्यांनी घेतलं दवाखान्यात न्या म्हणे, पण मग बाकीच्या लोकांनी नाही नेलं दवाखान्यात. मग यांनी अटक केलं 2 दिवसासाठी. 4 दिवस होते का
नाटक कशा बदललं?
मला फेकलं म्हणून.
Arrest. Sangeeta Thai said that after her mother threw her, Vasantdada Patil stopped, got out from the car, and ordered the police to take them to a hospital. They did. After that, they took Jamnabai and other 14 women to the custody, and they were there for 4 days.
Monika, Jamnabai seems pretty fearless, but also maybe a little crazy. Isn't your baby's life a pretty high price to pay for any demand, much less a name on a building? So I asked Jamnabai why she did it.
तुम्ही काय असं केलं?
म्हणजे मला बाबासाहेबाचं नामांतरासाठी फेकलेली. मराव की जगो, मला नाव पाहिजे होतं विद्यापीठला.
Jamnabai said, I threw her for Baba Saheb's Namantar, live or die, I wanted Baba Saheb's name to be given to the university.
तुम्ही पूर्वी विचार केला की मी असं करणार आहे?
नाही. म्हणजे यांच्या
त्या वेळात
त्या ग्रुपच्या बाया होत्या ना, जेवढ्या सोबत होत्या ना, आता आपण कसे एवढे जण बसलो, तेवढ्याला विचार नव्हता आपण मारणार आहेत का घरी वापस येणार आहेत, असा काही विचार नव्हता. फक्त जायचं म्हणजे जायचं आणि मार पण खायचा, अटक पण व्हायचं, पण असा विचार नव्हता की आपण का बरं झालो अटक म्हणून. असा अपमान किंवा गैरवाद काही वाटत नव्हतं. स्वाभिमान वाटायचं, म्हणजे आपण काहीतरी करू लागलो. मनात मध्ये असा उत्सव वाटायचा की आपण काहीतरी चांगलं करू लागलो आणि चांगलं झालेलं आहे, अभिमान वाटतो.
Sangeeta Thai said that she is proud what her mother and other protestants did. She said that they did not even think about whether they are dying or they are going back to homes. They were determined to go, ready to be attacked and arrested. She said they have to do something and they are doing it for right.
In other words, this was not just any name on a building. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was such a pivotal figure in Indian history that many people literally owe their education, jobs, and hopes to him. He helped found the modern movement to end caste, and as the writer of the Constitution, he firmly established reservations, aka quota-based affirmative action, in education, government jobs, and among elected representatives. Dr. Ambedkar was a leader in creating independent India because, as he said in the 1930 Round Table Conference in London, the British government was not just indifferent to India's inequality. Quote, "The reason why it does not intervene is because it is afraid that its intervention to amend the existing code of social and economic life will give rise to resistance. Of what good is such a government to anybody?"
You know, Emily, Dr. Ambedkar didn't advocate ending caste while leaving other power and structure in place. He acted to secure women's right to her father's property. He ensured that female workers had maternity leaves, and also he reduces the factory hours from 12 to 8. Before he died, he even revived Buddhism in India as a philosophy slash religion of equality. This was in opposition to caste system and patriarchy he saw in Hinduism. In this latest census, 8 million people reported that they were Buddhist.
With such a resume, he was clearly one of India's most important leaders. But for a long time, he wasn't seen as one. A lot of people learn about Gandhi as the leader of India's independence movement and Jawaharlal Nehru, the first prime minister, as the founder of India's present government. That Dr. Ambedkar wasn't in that group was pure casteism.
If people are saying she is lower caste, that's why she's Ambedkarite, that's why she no, she is Mahar, that's why she's Ambedkarite. Man, there are many people who are from upper caste and they are Ambedkarites. Just because of his caste. Means they discriminate, they never discriminate Gandhi. They never says Gandhi belongs to this community. The fact is he just worked for his area. He didn't work for untouchables. The caste system, you know what, Emily? The caste system is so bad that even people don't feel some other people's pain. Just because of caste system, people are dividing themselves like upper, lower, middle. What is that? Human beings are human beings. I mean, they work for themselves, they eat, they do all the stuff same way, and still they were like feeling like no, we are upper and they are lower, they are untouchables, they can't live with us. Why?
For listeners who might not be familiar with these terms, could you define them really quickly?
To understand what caste system or Varna system is, Dr. Ambedkar particularly studied the Vedas, Upanishads, and other books now considered Hindu. He came to a conclusion that the Vedas hymn, Purushukta, made the four Varnas sacred institutions. In it, the Brahmins were described from mouth, Kshatriyas were from their arms, the Vaishya were from thighs, and Shudra were from feet of the Purush or man.
In other words, each of these groups supposedly had a place in society that they should not trespass for the good of society. The history of caste is complicated and local and about access to resources, but for now, I'll just let you finish introducing the terms our audience should know.
The first three Varnas, that is Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishya, are so called upper caste, and the Shudra were called lower caste. Outside these four Varnas were untouchables and Adivasis.
Meaning original inhabitant.
Academics today usually called untouchables Dalit. Dr. Ambedkar also belongs to the untouchable community, particularly the Mahar subcaste or Jati. Other leaders had statues of them and building with their names everywhere.
Like Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi.
But even the idea of naming Marathwada University after Dr. Ambedkar provoked violence. First, attackers focused on destroying government properties, including transportation. Then the violence spread to the village areas around Aurangabad, including in the district of Nanded and Parbhani. Attackers targeted Buddhist people, sexually assaulting women, destroying properties, and even torturing and murdering some people. Many people left their homes and fled to Aurangabad.
Investigators estimated at the time that these attacks, which lasted for 67 days, affected 25,000 people in 1,200 villages. About 5,000 people became homeless, and about 2,000 people fled into forested areas and cities. This is when the Namantar movement started. One of the leaders in Aurangabad, Gangadhar Gare, said then that the renaming, quote, is the question of Dalits' self-consciousness, and all the Dalit brothers will unitedly fight for this struggle, end quote. The Namantar became a matter of basic self-respect. Are we going to let this violence dictate how we live, whether we hope for equality?
67 days passed before the government acted to end the violence. There was a curfew in Aurangabad to prevent attacks there. But outside the city, local police were sometimes looking the other way, sometimes helping the attackers.
Sometimes police risked their lives or were helpful as well. I'll get into more detail on everything that happened in the next episodes, but Monika, I have one major question about all this, which I think was behind Jamnabai's dramatic sacrifice too. If the state government wasn't going to do anything about the violence, why were they so in favor of the Namantar to begin with?
So the background to this is emergency. When Indira Gandhi suspended democracy for 2 years, she ended the state of emergency in 1977, thinking that she and her Congress party will easily win re-election. Instead, a coalition government formed with the Janata Party, which later became the BJP. In Maharashtra, this meant that Sharad Pawar formed a rebel faction of Congress, became chief minister in partnership with Janata Party. But the Janata Party had a reputation for being right-leaning. It seems that Sharad Pawar pushed the Namantran issue to regain reputation of being for Dalit peoples.
So this feels like casteism to me. We don't know anyone's intentions for sure, but it seems like Sharad Pawar wanted Dalit people's votes but didn't care enough about their safety to interfere in the violence. This is one kind of identity politics, where politicians name drop Dr. Ambedkar and other figures to win over various communities without putting much effort into changing the system that keeps political and social power in the hands of traditional elites.
At the same time, Emily, another type of identity politics was gaining ground. An important group behind that type were the Dalit Panthers. As the Black Panthers in US, Dalit Panthers proudly claimed the title of Dalit or oppressed. Their powerful poetry, speeches, and other literatures have been very influential since the late 1970s. In fact, they are responsible for popularizing the word Dalit.
तुम्हाला केव्हापासून दलित पॅन्थर्स बद्दल माहित
इथं आलं तसं तेव्हापासून
1978 पासून
तेव्हा जो गहू खायला होते आणि लाल जेवारी
दुष्काळ पडला
भाकर नव्हते राहत खायला.
Jamnabai first heard about Dalit Panthers when they built the area she lives in, Kabir Nagar. She moved there in 1978 to escape famine.
दलितावर अन्याय अत्याचार वाढल्यामुळे हे दलित पॅन्थर उदयास आले.
That was Bandu Kamble. He's a current member of the Dalit Panthers and still lives close to Kabir Nagar. He said that the Dalit Panthers built the neighborhood because the injustices against Dalit people were increasing. Implied in this is the idea that Dalit people are safer when concentrated in cities. A journalist at the time noted that when the anti-Namantar attacks happened in Marathwada, the Dalit Panthers encouraged people who fled to Aurangabad to stay in the city.
The Dalit Panthers really focused on the violence happening to Dalit people. And while they did that, they brought caste in the public eyes. There were lots of people in power, similar to Gandhi, wanted caste to be reformed socially. Hindus would reform themselves and their prejudice, so there would be no long reservations required or no debates will go on caste. The Dalit Panthers, like Dr. Ambedkar, rejected the idea and wanted to see more actions about caste from their politicians.
They were also part of a period of more militancy that started with the Shiv Sena in 1966. The Shiv Sena channeled economic frustration and caste Hindu identity in Bombay into displays of hate speech and violence. The Shiv Sena claimed the definition of Maharashtrian for themselves, in opposition to Southern Indian, Muslim, and Dalit people. In 1972, Arjun Dangle, Namdeo Dasal, Raja Dale, and others formed the Dalit Panthers. Soon after, Raja Dale wrote an article for Independence Day saying that a flag that did not protect Dalit people from caste violence was just a, quote, piece of cloth to be stuffed up the Savarna's ass, end quote. Suvarna means someone within that 4 Varna system, but people often use it to mean someone within the first 3 Varnas.
In response, the Shiv Sena and the Janata Party marched on the headquarters of the publishers of the article, saying that they would burn it down. Anupama Rao, a professor of history in Columbia University in New York, writes in the caste question that this was the pattern at that time. The Dalit Panther would abuse casteism in the government, the Shiv Sena would threaten violence, and the government would look on in silent support. That militant side of Dalit Panther is famous. But Emily, it seems like there was more to the situation in Kabir Nagar. Besides building the neighborhood, the Dalit Panther had frequently met and became close to the resident. This is especially true of the leaders of Dalit Panthers in Aurangabad, Gangadhar Gade.
काही स्त्री नत होते का?
नाही आम्हीच जाऊन त्याला उठवायचो बाया बाया जाऊन उठा चला गाडी साहेब.
I asked Jamnabai whether there were any female leaders in the protest. Jamnabai just remembered Gangadhar Gade coming to protest. She said, "We ladies used to wake him up. Please get up, Gade Sahib. We have to go." She also mentioned that he is responsible for the Dr. Ambedkar statue at the entrance to the Basti. Basti means a working class neighborhood. Often the word for that is slum, but Basti is what people use in Hindi.
त्याच्यानंतर मग गंगाधर गाडे ते याच्यामध्ये पॅन्थरमध्येच मग होते ते पण मग त्यांच्या हिशोबानं काही कार्यकर्ते बनले मग इथं वस्ती बसली ही पूर्ण वस्ती बसवली मग त्यांनी मग सगळी वस्ती एवढा एरिया त्यांनी बसवला 51 रुपये घ्यायचे पुतळा बसवायचा प्रत्येक वस्तीमध्ये 51 रुपये ज्या माणसाला प्लॉट द्यायचा त्यांनी 51 रुपये घ्यायचा पुतळा आणायचा असं करून ती वस्ती बसवली त्याच्यानंतर दर 8 दिवसाला मग ते वंदनाला यायचे मग 500-600 लोक दर रविवारी वंदना घ्यायचे.
That was Rukhmini Sakharam. She was also at the protest where Jamnabai threw baby Sangeeta and they stayed in jail together afterwards. She said that Dalit Panther used to come in the neighborhood every week. They would bring a statue and collect money from everyone who wanted the plot of land and then call everyone to sit together. Every weekday and 500 or 600 residents would do Vandana, a Buddhist religion service together. This has also meant that the Dalit Panther could organize protest very quickly.
त्याच्यानंतर मग ते गंगाधर गाडीच्या डोक्यात आलं की आपल्याला विद्यापीठाला नामांतर झालं पाहिजे मग त्यांना अशा रात्रीच्या मिटिंगी वगैरे घेतल्या प्रत्येक वस्तीमध्ये आणि आपल्या लोकांना सांगितलं
मीटिंगला
हो मग राहायचं इथं तर जावंच लागत असंच होतं आपल्याला या वस्तीत राहणार तर मग जाणं भागच आहे ना मग जायचंच पूर्ण बाया माणसं सगळे जायचे मग ते नामांतराचं ते सगळ्या लोकांना सांगितलं मग त्यांनी तो नामांतराचा विचार केला मग काय 8 दिवस 15 दिवस महिन्यामध्ये 2 मोर्चे काढायचे 1 महिन्याला कधी 2 महिन्याला कधी 2 महिन्यात एकदा कधी 1 महिन्यात 2दा असे.
Rukhmini said, after that, the idea that we should change the name of our university came into the head of Gangadhar Gade. That night, they held meetings about this in every basti and told us about it. When I started to ask whether she went to the meetings, she said yes. If you wanted to live here, you had to go. It was like that. We wanted to live in the basti, so we had to go, right? So we would go. All the women, men, everyone would go. They told everyone about the Namantar. That idea was settled. Then we would hold morchas every 8 days, 15 days, twice in a month. Once in 2 months, twice in 1 month, like that.
In the meetings, Gangadhar Gade and other leaders would give speeches. At the same time, residents would bring their problems and issues about the settlements like electricity failing and irregular supply of water, etc.
Monika, I think this is really interesting because one of the most important strategies of the Black Panther Party for self-defense was to step in where the U.S. government failed its black citizens. They dealt with malnutrition with a free breakfast program for children, and they hoped to decrease infant mortality with a free health clinic.
A member of the Black Panther Party from Chicago, Evan King, said, "Our survivor program heightened the contradiction that exists between black people and the government. When we were able to feed literally thousands of children every morning in various cities in the country, parents began to ask, why wasn't the government do that? The government had all the resources at its disposal." And Emily, it seems that the Dalit Panthers were highlighting the contradiction too.
Yes, we can think about that quote again by Raja Dale about the usefulness of a flag that doesn't protect Dalit people. Meanwhile, the Dalit Panthers had built a safe neighborhood. And we know this was effective because Rukhmini and Jamnabai both remembered exactly when they moved to Aurangabad, because that was when they started getting into politics too.
इथं आल्यानंतर इथं जेव्हा आलो आम्ही 70ला आलो तेव्हा आम्ही इथं आलो तर इथं कुठं कुठं तर घर होते एक घर इथं एक घर तिथं असे होते मग आम्ही पण जागा धरली 51 रुपये द्यायचे बाबासाहेबाच्या पुतळ्याला बसवायसाठी आणि जागा धरायची मग ते आम्ही जागा धरली जागा धरल्यानंतर मग सुरुवातीला मग संघटना कळायला लागली पॅन्थर कळायला लागलं कोण माणूस आहे काय करतोय याच्या मागे जावं नाही जावं हे आपल्याला सगळंच कळायला लागलं मग
Rukhmini said that when she moved to Aurangabad in 1970, she started going to meetings and bringing money for Baba Saheb's statue. Before, she had not even understood the importance of Dr. Ambedkar. But when she was enlightened, she said, we started to understand about organizations, about the Panthers, who is that person, what is he doing, whether to follow him or not. We started to understand everything. Monika, I think this is where we get back to identity politics, to the positive definition of identity politics, where change happens by organizing our communities around what we need and what exactly is in our way.
Absolutely. This was a good way to build a broader movement too. If each community organized itself about what it needs, like housing or access to higher education, we start to see lots of similarities between communities, whether SC, ST, OBC or Muslim.
And it just feels obvious that those communities should band together and fight to change the system that keeps them largely in poverty and without political power. Monika, this vision has been around for a while, before Dr. Ambedkar even. So why hasn't that revolution happened?
It's not that, it is happening. The Bahujan Samaj Party and Mool Nivasi Sangh are working on it. The Women's Against Hindutva Conference are working on it. Sometimes communist and labor organizations are working on it. But identity politics, it's really complicated. Sometimes instead of unity, you get violence.
Like in the Namantar Andolan. Only a few years before all the violence in Marathwada.
Marathwada.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Why you get scared? You speak good with that.
Okay. There was a powerful student movement demanding more representation in politics and more attention to the economy there. What broke that movement and why the reaction to the Namantar announcement was so violent is all in the next podcast.
So tune in again next week for the second part of this 8-part series on Namantar Andolan.
Monika, thank you so much for talking with me about identity politics today. What people mean when they say it, whether it might be better described as a shift from Congress casteism to Shiv Sena casteism, how the Dalit Panthers pushed a different version of identity politics, and what that meant for Jamnabai and Rukhmini Bai.
Emily, I'm so glad to work on this with you. I love to work for more episodes. But, you know, my commitments are there.
Yeah, you should just cancel that silly internship and hang out in Nagpur with me. No, really though, you're gonna be amazing. People, this is Monika Khobragade, soon to be the CEO of a famous NGO, a Nobel-winning professor, or maybe India's next president.
And this is Emily Hayes, and subscribe to her podcast.
Special thanks to Jamnabai Appa Gaikwad, Sangeeta Deepak Pradhan, and Rukhmini Sakharam Satpute for sharing their stories. Thank you to Bandu Kamble, Dr. Bharat Sonawane, and Dr. Arvind Gaikwad for helping me meet these activists. Thank you to Subodh for helping me transliterate the interviews afterwards. Thank you to Bhau Lokhande sir and Jambhulkar sir for our conversations about politics at the time of the Namantar Andolan. Other works cited, including books by Dr. Ambedkar, Anupama Rao, and Jacoby Williams, are in the podcast description. Also, I really want to hear what you think. Leave comments on iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, or wherever you find your podcasts. You can also comment on Facebook and Twitter with the hashtag #StruggleForAName. See you next week.